Grown-ups, in between, churning babies. Right about now, is your boy.
Hi, this is Yemi Stembridge, and I'm going to take the next few minutes in this short video lecture to provide an overview of culturally responsive education, otherwise known as CRE. In subsequent videos, I will discuss and further unpack the 6 themes I use to describe the purposes and utility for CRE in the broad context of teaching and learning. Before we even start, I want to stress that CRE, as I know it, is to be felt and experienced as much as it is to be understood in the intellectual sense. It's important to embrace that notion as we move forward in this series of video lectures. Otherwise, your capacity for incorporating these principles in your work will be limited by the boundaries of intellectualism. I think of culturally responsive education as the epistemological offspring of multicultural education and critical race theory. The terms culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally responsive teaching, culturally relevant pedagogy, and culturally relevant teaching are often used interchangeably, and that's okay. But I prefer the term culturally responsive education because responsive indicates a dynamic and ongoing commitment of schools to build capacity for understanding the ways in which students and their communities make sense of their lived experiences and opportunities. The term relevant, rather than responsive, may mislead some to think of culture as a static characteristic, which could in turn support unintended stereotyping. I tend to prefer the term education over pedagogy or instruction because it evokes a broader sense for the work of schools beyond just the teaching that occurs in classrooms during the traditional school day. Education includes the sum total of those efforts to affirm and include all children in the school community. This is an effort not only by classroom teachers, but also administration, support staff, clerical personnel, and even the persons who are responsible for ensuring that the grounds are secure, the bathrooms clean, and the cafeteria meals served. This is an all-in paradigm. CRE is defined in large part by the unyielding belief that students from racial and ethnic minority backgrounds, like all children, benefit from high academic expectations, positive and caring relationships with teachers, and classrooms and school communities that consciously respect, honor, and draw on their individual, social, and cultural identities. There are many persons who have contributed to the proliferation and clarification of the idea of cultural responsiveness, but most any work under the CRE banner that is reputable and research-based is drawn from one or more of 3 conceptual matriarchs: Gloria Ladson-Billings, Geneva Gay, and Sonia Nieto. Gloria Ladson-Billings uses the term culturally relevant teaching to define pedagogy that bridges and explains the dominant culture so as to empower students intellectually, socially, emotionally, and politically by using cultural reference to impart knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Geneva Gay describes culturally responsive teaching as practices that use the cultural characteristics, experiences, and perspectives of ethnically diverse students as conduits for more effective teaching. Sonia Nieto defines culturally responsive education as an approach to education intentionally designed to make use of students' cultures as a source of content, references, and styles for teaching and learning. All agree that academic knowledge and skills situated within students' lived experiences and frames of reference are more personally meaningful, have higher interest appeal, and are learned more easily and thoroughly. I think of CRE as being best discussed and described in 6 themes: cultural identity, relationships, vulnerability, asset-focused factors, rigor, and engagement. The 6 CRE themes give conceptual context for describing how pedagogy supports equity in teaching and learning. It is the language we use to articulate the elements of good practice. Taken together, these 6 themes give us the context and baseline for understanding the ways in which some students who hold dear to social and cultural identities, marginalized and deficitized by mainstream instructional designs, may feel alienated by school pedagogies and structures. My biggest challenge in working with schools is not making the argument that CRE is a powerful construct for closing equity gaps. No. My biggest challenge is that I find that too many want to reduce the idea of culturally responsive education to a package of instructional strategies that can be easily taught and immediately measured. The problem with that way of thinking is that even though we want all students to become active and successful learners, there is no magic wand that will, with one flick of the wrist, remove all the challenges that impede student learning. While we think of some strategies as having far greater potential than others for positively impacting student understanding and achievement, we believe wholeheartedly that it is the ingenuity and thoughtfulness of school staff that make any strategy potentially effective. Master teachers are never made effective by the strategy. Master teachers make the strategy effective. That being said, there is no such thing as a CRE checklist. CRE is a function of cultural awareness, teaching competencies, and habits of mind that inform how good pedagogy can draw from a toolkit of plain old good practices. There are no secret hoodoo strategies for Black or Latino students, or any ethnic group for that matter, no more so than we would contend that the academic performance of white students are easily corrected by a standing set of universal strategies. We believe that kids are kids, and carefully considered strategies have the potential to work well in many contexts when teaching sets its lens to respect and understand how student and community perspective is likely to receive the support and inputs offered. Equity, then, can be said to be the commitment to find what works for whom, never relenting on the belief that with the right support, all of our children have the real potential to reach the highest of heights. The premise of CRE is based on the belief that teaching is far too complicated to fit any one rigidly prescriptive method. Teaching is the most intimate and all-encompassing task known to mankind, and culture is the most basic social human device in the history of the human race. It is the set of tools and understandings that make societies possible. When you really think about it, how could anyone reasonably suggest that we could ever teach anyone anything without first giving thought to the many, many ways in which culture informs our perspective of the world? At the beginning of this lecture, I emphasized that CRE, as I know it, is to be felt and experienced as much as it is to be understood by the intellect. Keeping that in mind, there are 3 overarching lessons I have gleaned from my work with teachers and students relative to this idea of culturally responsive education that frame the individual and interconnected themes of CRE. These are my understandings I draw from to help me identify where my intellectual understanding of pedagogy can be operationalized into my design and thinking of real-life, actual teaching and learning experiences. The first of these 3 overarching lessons is the architects of students' learning experiences should design instruction that builds and leverages the sense of community as well as the individual academic identity of students. The second overarching lesson is the meta-reflection and individual acts of teaching should regularly focus on the truth that strategies are only successful when they are thoughtfully implemented with the local social context and hoped-for outcomes in mind. And finally, teaching is profoundly human. Great teaching frames intellectual understandings in a meaningful web of emotional and spiritual understandings. And by spiritual, I don't mean religious. When I say spiritual, I'm referring to things of, relating to, or affecting the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. These intellectual and spiritual understandings ultimately empower students to invest in and own their learning. This is the power of education and why I don't think any learning experience can maximize its potential for impact on students if it isn't responsive to culture. Let's consider this framework as we move forward to delve further into the 6 themes we use to guide our continually emerging understandings of CRE and the limitless range of opportunities to craft instructional strategies that honor the integrity of culturally responsive education. Thanks so much for listening. Go forth and be responsive.
Say go DJ.